Welcome back on the AM show. Now, we talk corruption in our big stories. The first, Ghana ranked 70th out of 180 countries in terms of corruption per the latest Corruption Perceptions Index released by Transparency International. The country scored 43 out of a possible 100, which has been its score since 2020, 4 years consecutively. Well, this morning we discussed the repercussions with Dr. Ishmael Nidodu, diplomat, human development expert, senior strategy advisor to the UN, African governments, and bilateral agencies. We also have Dr. John Osai-Kwapong, a CDD fellow, and Martin Pebu, lawyer and human rights activist. But in the studio with me, online, we have Dr. John Osai-Kwapong currently. Let me say a very good morning to Dr. Osai-Kwapong. Thank you, Doc, for joining.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Great. And in the studio to situate the conversation, we have our own in-house data analyst, Isaac Kofi Ejay. He joins the conversation as well. I see you here with your fly, is it waistcoat or vest? And I told you I would be mischievous about this situation. It looks very good on you, by the way.
Thank you very much. I'm learning from you.
Learning from me. This one, you are in a comfortable lead. I see you with your fancy mouse, your laptop, your ThinkPad. I think we're about to delve into lots of stuff.
Yeah.
So, corruption. Even before you go to what it says, we've heard a number of people say different things, including the former Auditor General, Daniel Yaw-Domelevo, who says he's even surprised that we didn't fall lower. And I agree with him on the back of what we've seen.
I'm surprised too, because there were loads of corruption perception, circulating.
Which ones come readily to your mind?
Well, I mean, we have the Cecilia Dapar case. There were other major issues that shook the nation in 2023, which even caught the attention of the Office of the Special Prosecutor. There's the famous, La Bianca story, and all of those things where there were people really connected to these stories, and then they caught the attention of the Office of the Special Prosecutor. So I was expecting that we dip, but fortunately, we've been able to maintain our score of 43. But I always say that if the Corruption Perception Index were likened to an examination paper, and it means that we failed since we started featuring in 2012. Because you cannot get, your best score cannot be 48 and you expect to make the mark, or you expect to pass that corruption perception examination. We have failed because out of 100, we've never been able to get more than 40%, more than up to 50% in the ranking.
It's always been, I think our highest was what? Was it 46? 48.
In 2014, and that's what you see on your screen. But it's always important to do some sort of comparison when we are talking about the Corruption Perception Index. So the first time that we featured on this index was 2012, where we scored 45. And then in 2013, we had a change of government where former President Mahama took the reins of power, was able to improve it to 46 in his first year, 2013. By 2014, we had achieved our best score, which is 48. And then 2015, 2016, a different story started emerging where we started, declining consistently, moving from 48 to 47. And unfortunately, he ended his term with a score of 43. So he takes us to our best score in 2014, 48, and then ends at 43. Now, in 2017, another, change of government occurred. And this time around, President Akufo-Addo's first term, he inherited a score of 43, and his first term, he dropped the mark to 40. Started, improving it in his first year, second and third year, moving it to 41. It was held constant in 2018 and 2019, 41. Then we saw his best improvement in 2020 when he moved the score to 43. And since then, it's been held constant for some time now.
And so the claim made by the NDC that their worst performance is the MPP's best performance still remains. For me, it's not even about 48 and 43 or 40. It's about going past 50. I feel that is what we should aim at least in the immediate term.
Exactly.
Going past 50.
And if you look at the ranking, we've improved in the ranking, not because we've improved on our score, but because other countries are deteriorating in terms of the corruption perception index. If you look at a country like South Africa, dipped in 2023, and that gave countries like Ghana a chance to also increase. But the argument or the claim about somebody's best being your best being your best being your worst being somebody's best, it's actually it's something that we need to really look at it. So if you just look at the data on the basis of trend analysis, the story may emerge that, I mean, we were doing so well under the Mahama administration, and then we've not really been doing well, or the fight against corruption has stagnated under President Akufo-Addo. But if you decide to do some netting of the figures, a different story emerges. So,
which is what?
For instance, 2012, former President Mahama inherited a score of 45. 2013, he added a mark of 1. 2014 added 2. 2015, he lost 1. And 2016, he lost the biggest margin, -4. So cumulatively, if you decide to net how much he really added to our corruption perception index, you get -2.
Right.
Because, I mean, you added 1 in your first year, 2 in your second year, improve it by 2 in your second year. By your third year, you are declined by 1, and your fourth year, you had the biggest shock of -4.
Right.
So if you do the...
It actually lost ground.
Exactly, -2. Then let's go to President Akufo-Addo's first term, where he inherited 43. His first term, his first year, he lost -3 points. Second year, he gained 1. Third year, no addition. Fourth year, +2. That gives you a net of 0. And his his second term, which is still in progress or is still in session, is not really ended. We've not made any progress at all. The net has been 0 throughout. But one thing that emerged from the Corruption Perception Index report is the fact that the Transparency International believes that in Ghana's situation, we have not been able to improve because of the failed judicial system. In the sense that they believe our failed judicial system is providing or is serving as a fertile ground for corruption to thrive.
I mean, look at red tape in institutions. Look at it's all there.
Yeah.
There are avenues for corruption, glaring avenues.
Glaring avenues, and they believe that the judiciary is not really, helping us to fight corruption where there are loopholes. And in some of their recommendation, they point out that the immunity that judges actually enjoy should be truncated or reduced, so that, you can have that means to fight corruption. But we also had access to the Global Rule of Law Index, which ranks your judicial system. And we saw that there's some sort of correlation between Ghana's Global Rule of Law Index versus its corruption index. So when you have Ghana's Global Rule of Law Index falling, you see corruption also deteriorating in that same regard. It's been held constant for some years now, and Corruption Perception Index has also been held constant. So there's that there's that correlation between our rule of law and then also the Corruption Perception Index. So Ben, that's what I can actually report from the Corruption Perception Index. We've been stagnating for the past 4 consecutive times, and we are still at 43, being ranked 70th out of 180 countries.
Thank you so much, Kofi, for sharing all of these details with us. Isaac Kofi-Adjei is a data analyst here at Joy News. But let me come now to Dr. John Osai Kwapong. He's a CDD fellow. Doc, I want to start off with you on this beat. Here we are again, Corruption Perception Index, and it appears there's no joy and no surprises in there. The former Auditor General, Daniel Yao Domelevo, says, listen, I even expected worse. I expected a decline. And some people are scratching their heads as to why we still even managed to get 43 of those points, looking at all the perception in respect of different myriad stories bordering on corruption. But from where you sit, Doc, did this come as any surprise to you? And what do you make of the latest ranking and score of Ghana on the CPI?
It really doesn't come as a surprise. It's the score has remained the same. So initially, when I read the report, I said to myself, on the one hand, we've not improved, which is not a good thing. But on the other hand, quote unquote, the score didn't get worse. So thank God for small mercies. But I think it overall goes to show that we are really not moving.
Hello, Doc.
Yes.
Like Domelevo, were you expecting it to get worse?
Because yes, and I say that because if you look at the most recent Afrobarometer survey from 2022 on the question of how well the government is handling the fight against corruption, only 12% rated the government's anti-corruption efforts as very well. Right. So then, and this is just only a year and a half to 2 years late, no, even more than 2 years later. And then there was also a question about the level of corruption. And in 2022, as much as 69% said it has increased a lot. And so when I put it within the context of what the most recent Afrobarometer was able to capture, then you realize that, or at least you begin to expect that the CPI score for 2024 would even decline further. But then again, you're talking about 13 different sources of data. The methodology is a little different from what Afrobarometer measures. But nonetheless, the perception of corruption, in our public institutions, the perception of how we are handling the fight against corruption, the perception of the level of increases in corruption, it doesn't surprise me that we are at 43%. We are scoring 43 out of 100 in terms of what the CPI is capturing. And it goes to show you that we're really not moving the needle much when it comes to the fight against corruption.
I don't even know about moving the needle because we've remained constant. It has stood constant for 4 times now. What do you make of that as well? Because even this score of 43 and the placement on the continent is only because some other countries also slipped further, like South Africa, among others. What do you make of that negative constancy, if you like, when it comes to this ranking?
I think one of the things that you and I have talked about most recently when it comes to the fight against corruption is that I think we lean too heavily on using the legal tools to fight corruption. And I've said this over and over and over again that there's a place for using the legal tools to fight corruption and hold public servants accountable when they flout the rules, and the law. And I've also said that I agree with the president when he says not until you find yourself in trouble, you would not appreciate due process. So yes, when someone is accused of having engaged in acts of corruption, you also want to make sure that you give them all of the due process for them to prove their innocence or otherwise. But that heavy reliance on the legal tools alone and ignoring the political tools that can be used to fight corruption, right? Which is, asking, a minister or an appointee to step aside, to resign, whilst an investigation is going on, or taking swift action to condemn stories that come up and not exonerate people until that due process, or at least appearing to exonerate people until that due process is done, for me, is what continues to deepen this growing perception that not only is there corruption, but the will to fight it is not as strong as one would expect. And I think that is what is continuing to fuel the scores that we are seeing.
Well, let me shift gears now and move the conversation forward. Let me bring in Dr. Ishmael Ni Dodu. Doc, thank you so much for joining the conversation. You would have to unmute, Doc. Have you unmuted now, Doc?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. I can hear you now. What do you make? What is your general assessment of this latest corruption perception index?
Right. Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. It is very intriguing that corruption continues to be the bane of our politics, and one of the things that is very interesting is to see that we have not moved the needle at all in dealing with the issues of corruption. What I would say that it's also very, very worrying is the fact that corruption is embedded within the state within the state apparatus. So you're talking about a situation where state-sponsored corruption is becoming very, very worrying across the board. When you look at the index as they looked at it through across the several African countries, Sub-Saharan Africa, we've seen that most of the countries are not doing very well. Less than a quarter of it are actually making some progress in corruption, which means that the commitment to addressing the issues of corruption is not there, and this becomes very, very concerning when you are looking at it from the perspective of how to deal with the issue of governance and how good governance actually translates into peace and prosperity that citizens want. In other words, because of the state of corruption, our democratic processes, our good governance values are not yielding the dividends that citizens want to see in terms of transforming their life, transforming the work of societies, and getting Africa move forward. And looking at the issue from Ghana perspective, we are talking about the implications of a judicial system which is not enforcing the law. The actual rule of law system itself is a challenge in terms of how it is applied, and the justices and how fairness and justice is applied. And then to also see when you deconstruct it and look at our daily lives, some of the respondents' questions that were posed and the responses that came out indicates that around the rank and file of our society, all facets of society, are experiencing this act of corruption, which is actually affecting them. And what is also very concerning is the fact that significant numbers of respondents don't even want to talk about it or say it because it has become a part and parcel of our daily lives. This is very, very challenging.
Looking at the challenge of corruption, why do you think we keep scoring so low, Doc? Is it because the systems are not there? You would see in the report talk about the unnecessary red tape, among others, which are tools for corruption. Where do you see the crux of the problem?
The crux of the problem are multifaceted. Number one, the political will to address corruption from our society, within the rubric of our society. We don't see a sense that this is actually something that we are very committed to doing. Look at the Cecilia Dapar case. Look at how the case was handled. Look at I remember 3 years ago there was an expose of the justice systems and the acts of corruption that most of them are engaged in bringing about justice. Now, when you have a situation where citizens don't feel that when something happens to them, it can be corrected or justice will be meted in fairness to them, then you are looking at a society where there's a lack of faith in addressing issues that relate to their peace and prosperity and justice. So the commitment is the first thing that needs to be addressed. The second thing is bringing back what I would call ethical conduct in public services, because the corruption is actually within public administration, and most of them are state sponsored. So how do you enforce ethical conduct within state institutions? I think that it is important to have a very, very strong and biting ethical institution, such as maybe a ethical child or something like that can really, really deal with the issues of corruption and ethics and professionalism and standards within public services. Then the whole issue of politics becoming the factor for aggrandizement of individuals. So you have to, the whole notional view that you have to engage in politics or be close to political power in order to be able to have some wealth, to create some wealth and riches. So then politics and its power and influence, juxtaposing that on the ability to create wealth, then fester the whole issue of corruption, because then people are gravitating towards grabbing power and using it and abusing it. So it leads to, there's a complete breakdown in ethical standards, which is allowing abuse of power, privileges, and a use of these privileges to engender the acts of corruption. So a combination of these factors is really what is pushing making it very complicated for us to address it. I would also say that accountability mechanism are also very weak. We are not seeing most of our media actually following corruption cases, prosecuting their cases themselves, and pushing it to the finish line. I would want to see, for example, a citizen or a media who have gone after some of these cases, taking it to court and persecuting it and letting have. I mean, the last time we saw something like this was when the late Comrade Tumo did it in Ghana. And I think something like, if we begin to see acts like this, public officers will feel that they are going to be held responsible. We also don't see, our traditional authorities or clergy or elders in society talking about the issue, and some of them taking it upon themselves to actually push it to the finish line and getting some people, prosecuted for what they have done. So, lack of punitive actions, lack of accountability, people just don't fear doing these things, engaging acts of corruption, and the lack of political will in the country. All these things, when you put together, is just creating enabling environment that just festers the acts of corruption overall. Right.
Let me bring in lawyer and human rights activist Martin Kpebu now. Martin, good morning. Mr. Kpebu, good morning. Please unmute, Mr. Kpebu. You have to unmute.
Good morning, Ben.
It's good to have you join the conversation. It's the first time this year, and we're grateful to have you.
Yeah.
Right. So here we go.
I can hear you now.
Okay. Down to my question. I was saying that it was good to have you join the conversation, but the cesspool of corruption appears to be going ever deeper. I'd like to find out from you, what are your initial reactions to the latest CPI in respect of Ghana?
Yeah, Mr. Kaku, it appears they've been a bit charitable to us. Yes, because we should have declined at least a point or two. You see, in a country where President Kufuor has made his brother finance minister, we borrow, and then the finance minister's company makes money so that the president's family is being enriched in broad daylight, such broad daylight robbery, for us to have managed 43 again, it's a small miracle. I think the Transparency International need to set up. They probably need to review how they are going about this thing, because it's never happened that you have the president's family making money at the expense of the country. There's an incentive to borrow, and that's how they borrowed and landed us in trouble. And you're still giving us 43. 43 for what, in God's name? I mean, where other, the finance minister, they borrow and borrow so that the president's family becomes rich.
But Mr.
Give us 43.
Mr. Kwebu, the CPI, I mean, Transparency International has its metrics, and they go by those metrics to come out with these figures. Are you disputing the figures? It's the same metrics they've used in the past. Hello, Mr. Kwebu.
Yes, that's what I'm disputing. I think the thing is a bit skewed, because listen, this is too gross. Gross. Too gross in our faces, Mr. Akaku. You have done shows on this particular fact. We can't take it. Look, this 43, they are trying to be a bit diplomatic. I mean, how? That we borrow and the president's family becomes rich, and you can give us 43 for that? Why? We borrow. Ghana borrows, then the president's family becomes rich. The very thing he calls corruption. You see, we're here in 2016. That's why we voted for him. He said Mahama was corrupt. Mahama had family and friends. It turned out Mahama didn't have more than 2 family members in the government. Now we have a government which is littered with so many of his family members. Amwakwata, Oforiata, the CEOs of so many public institutions, right? Yes, he also had ministers. Atachia, of course, Atachia is no longer in office. So many of his family members, uncountable. And Transparency International can give us 43 for that. I think they are being too diplomatic. Yes, so that's my reaction. And you see the irony that the worst mark that Mahama had, 43, that's the best that President Kufuor has had for 4 years. And it's even lucky Transparency International has been a bit charitable.
Well, on that very point, we just did the analysis. If you look at the gains since Mahama took over to the end of his tenure, what he lost, and then you look at Akufo-Addo and the gains he's made, actually, Mahama gets a negative score and Akufo-Addo gets a 0 score. But of course, if we're just looking at the raw scores in 2014, 48, which is the highest we've had in the Fourth Republic, or at least since 2012, when we got on the ranking, till now, you would see that at least the former president has had the highest score, and indeed his lowest is the highest of this regime, which makes for interesting reading. But I'd like to run this question by you together with my other guests, Martin Kwebu. Someone in academic circles, a prominent figure in this country, sends me this message. He doesn't want me to mention his name. He says, "Hello, Ben. I think the interpretations our political elite are putting to these figures are warped. If the researchers were to provide confidence intervals around these estimates, you would realize that the figures are virtually similar over the last 10 years. Thus, nothing has really changed. This simply means corruption has become endemic, and we need to rally as a nation to deal with it head on and stop the politicking." How do you react to that?
Well, in terms of the confidence level, I'm not a technical person in terms of doing confidence levels, so I'll stay from that. But generally, following the trend of corruption, yes, corruption has been endemic. It's not the last 10 years. It dates from way back. Kwame Nkrumah fought and fought. He didn't win. So it's always been there. So to say it's been endemic over the last 10 years is not actually an accurate picture. It's always been like that after independence. It got worse after Kwame Nkrumah's time. Then Buzia, this Kutuka and Co came in. Buzia, Echampon, you hear in his time, Pautubeji Golf. Rawlings came. Rawlings did a bit better, but there was still corruption. Then Kufuor came, it went up. You know, Kufuor was more corrupt than Rawlings. Then Atta Mills came, and you see, we started going up. Everybody knows that in the Fourth Republic, Atta Mills is the most honest man. You see how it started going up, and so Mahama benefited from it. That's how the 48 went up there, because the euphoria about Amils being an honest man was still there, and it helped Mahama to get the 48. Then after, you see that Mahama's own persona as a corrupt person then took over, and he started declining. And then Akufo-Addo, more corrupt than Mahama, has been there at 43. So that's been it. We've as a people, we are also enablers. Mr. Akaku, you know that these ministers come from families. These ministers are brothers. These ministers are our sisters, our uncles, our aunties, our parents. The money they bring home, we see the money, we see everything they do. We are not willing to report. It even rather appears that we ourselves, a lot of us are lacing our boots to go and join. So in a society where the citizens are also very corrupt, this is the situation you find.
That's a telling point you make, and I wholly agree with you, because we ourselves are enablers. Many a time you would see that the ordinary Ghanaian, I always point to this, the former Auditor General, Daniel Domelevo, who says he's surprised about this score because he feels we should have slipped or slumped even further. There was a situation where he could have employed his own son. In fact, his son was qualified for the role, applied. I don't know whether it's with the audit service or some other institution. He said, no, I am head of this institution. You are not going to work here. And that would be my stance as well. You can find work anywhere. You are qualified. Why not? He said no. But in this country, it must be, and that's why I've said that I don't want to be in certain positions, because if I'm there and you're a brother or whatever, you come, then I'll have to recuse myself. The law will take its course with you. But Dr. Osai-Kwapong, you said something about due process, which the president has reiterated. And I agree with him. Unless you find yourself in murky waters when the long arms of the law are dealing with you, you will not know how important due process is. I understand. I agree with the president on that point. But does it substantiate, for example, his response when Cecilia Dapa resigned? And then he says, the bit about, I trust that your whatever will shine through in the end, that it will be made known in the end. What picture does that paint? Is that not in itself supporting? Supporting what has been done when no investigations have been conducted at the time, when, you are confident in what exactly? So those mannerisms, what do they say about leadership and the fight against corruption, Dr. Osai-Kwapong?
Exactly, and that was the point that I was just making, which is when you decide to also use the political tools to fight corruption, which I'm a very big advocate of. One of the things that you have to be very careful in exercising those political tools in the fight against corruption is not to create the impression that you are truncating the due process of an accused person, right? By sort of preempting it to create this impression that, look, yes, some investigation is about to happen, but even before the investigation is done, I'm already confident that there's nothing about it, or you haven't engaged in anything untoward, right? The public is very discerning. They are able to make sense of some of these stories and some of these allegations. They are able to look at some of these stories and say, but it doesn't look right. It doesn't make sense. And that is where, for me, caution must be exercised when an appointing authority like the president wants to speak about an allegation that has emerged. If nothing at all, just remain neutral until the due process is completed. Because it is statements like that that fuels the growing perception that the commitment to fight corruption is not there, things like that. So you're right. Those things don't help. And yes, we may say that it's perception, but as Dr. Afarajan likes to say, in politics, perception is reality. And so you're correct. We ought to be very careful the kinds of statements that we make that seems to suggest that you are, in support of, someone who is shrouded in, or there's a cloud of corruption hanging over them, because again, you start losing some of that public goodwill as well.
Can look at the replication or duplication of institutions. You would note that sometimes a case comes up, some say, oh, it should go before Yoko. Some say, okay, Shraj petitions. Oh, no, let the CID take charge of it. I think we intentionally have a convoluted system so that people can find ways and means of getting out. And the president, in some senses, not that I necessarily support it, has been called a clearing agent because of that. Because before you realize investigations, maybe even Parliament wants to investigate something, oh, the CID has done something, the person is free. You remember the issue of Charles Bishu, who has had his own stint with the OSP and all of that. That's what I'm pointing to. If you have any reactions, I'd take that quickly before I move on to Dr. Dodu.
Yes, and so that lack of clarity can also create that confusion as to who is even supposed to fight corruption. But at the same time, I don't think that fighting corruption has to sort of be the responsibility of one single institution.
Right.
I don't see why, if let's say a Yoku, is investigating a particular issue, that there isn't some element of parliamentary oversight of the executive, that Parliament can't hold hearings and investigate the matter from their role, as one of their, institutions designed to exercise oversight in our governance system. It doesn't also stop even the president from, setting up a committee, so in as much as those different avenues through which we can conduct an investigation or fight corruption may seem to convolute it so you can keep sort of zigzagging and dodging through the system, they also all have a role to play.
Right.
I don't think you want to center the fight on one single institution because of the nature of corruption and
right.
the multi-dimensional nature in which it manifests itself in society.
Thank you for that quick response. Dr. Dodu, please hold for me. I am also told that we have Vitus Azim joining the conversation. I want to take a brief bite of what he has to share with us, and I'll come back to you. Vitus Azim is an anti-graft campaigner. Good morning, sir. Mr. Azim, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, good morning. I can hear you.
Great. What do you make? Two quick questions. What do you make of the latest ranking for 4 years running, 43? And the picture doesn't look like it's getting any better in the sense of the perception of corruption. And this crucial question. Yesterday, listening to the local chapter of Transparency International, you would hear the head talking about the fact that, look, sometimes, and it wasn't even that, it was Mami Atiwa Adodankwa, who would say that, listen, sometimes people come talk about corruption here, corruption there, and all of that, but proof, the hard evidence, they don't have. And so you can have the court of public, opinion, but the court of law cannot use that. What is your reaction to these two issues?
One, the performance, even I think that it's still better than the situation on the ground shows. We had several scandals. And so the score for the three is even being unnecessarily fair to the country. The score should have been lower. Because if you continue to remain at 43, when we're seeing worse things happening, it means that we would have even scored lower. But as for what people say, you see, the state resources have been set up, giving resources and the power to investigate allegations of corruption. So if I give you a pointer, I expect you to be able to now look for the evidence. And you have power to summon people to investigate, question them on oath, to gather the evidence, to now you go to court. So the excuse that people don't want to come out and give I don't have the power to do the investigation that you have the power to do. So what prevents you from using those powers that you've been given, the resources that you have been given to conduct appropriate investigation?
So what are you saying? I mean, in the sense of
the accountability is are just trying to get excuses. They're trying to get excuses. They need to take the allegations seriously and conduct their investigation seriously.
So go ahead, Mr. Azim.
In order to exonerate the person or to find the person culpable, and if the person is culpable, then you gather enough evidence to build a good case and go to court.
Let me give you a typical example. You remember the issue where some time back in the finance ministry and other places, but in the finance ministry, there were some people who were earning salaries. I remember someone was earning 20,000 plus, another maybe about 13,000, and three of them, they were not even officers at the finance ministry of all places. And they had been drawing salaries for many years. It came to light and all of that. We never got to know who and whom were behind that. Are those some of the issues you speak of? And how do we get to the bottom of that? When these institutions will not give you any information when you reach out to them?
Well, that's why I said the accountability institutions have power to compel the institutions to give information. Somebody prepared the voucher. Somebody wrote the check. The money went through the bank. The check went through the bank. How is this so difficult, even for you and I, ordinary citizens, to investigate this if we have the power? I mean, somebody signed the voucher. Somebody asked that they should prepare a voucher. Then somebody went and took the money from the bank. There are names that came out. How can you say that because I have drawn your attention to it and I haven't provided evidence? What evidence do you need? Because you have the power to even call the bank to give you the necessary information. Control Accountant General. There's a pay clerk. So these things, they are just finding excuses because some of these things involve people that matter in society and they don't want to pursue them. But those excuses, we cannot continue to accept those excuses for not carrying out their work. Then they should be scrapped. They should not exist.
Look at the SML situation, for example, and how it's being treated. Well, KPMG still on that beat, but you've heard from civil society hard on that. You try and reach the GRA for some information as the fourth estate tried. You hit, a blank. You go to the other side, the finance ministry, they tell you we can't release this information to you. It becomes really difficult. But I want to find out from you, and this is a question when we're done, I'll run by my other guests as well. The Chief of Staff, Fremont Sayapari, is saying we must trust state institutions to fight corruption. That was her reaction to this bit. She says there's no basis for CSOs and other persons to continuously perceive persons who have been exonerated by state institutions as having engaged in corrupt activity or wrongdoing. She says, quote, unfounded allegations of corruption and perception of wrongdoing hardly aid the fight against corruption. When corruption allegations have been investigated and findings made exonerated the subject of investigations, there is no basis for continuous suspicion of wrongdoing by civil society and other persons who have access to the media. But we also know about the clearing, blanket clearing of people, even when you might even want to call it hardcore evidence has been adduced to them. How do you react to the Chief of Staff's comments?
It's very interesting because she was in civil society. So for her to say this, I'm really surprised. The point is that, one, the investigations are not conducted in a transparent way. The evidence, the reports are not even made public, and the recommendations are not implemented. So why would civil society agree to this? Apart from the general impression that civil society has about these anti-corruption institutions, that they are not, they don't have too much confidence in the work they do. If they say, like, we can still go back to the Brazilian case, in Australia. You just come out and clear everybody. Nobody is found guilty. Who wrote the letters for the people to go and get visas from the Australian embassy? Doesn't the airline have a manifest that shows the names of the people who went? When they were brought back, what action was taken against them? So I can say nobody was guilty of all these things. So the point is that the investigations are not convincing. Sometimes they don't even make the report public. So how can you expect us to believe you? So it's unfortunate that the chief of staff who was in civil society should be saying this, because she knows more than she should be saying.
Mr. Azim, right before you take leave of us, what then do you think is the way forward? Where do we go from here? We're in an electoral year. We've already seen it. Corruption becomes even more rampant in an electoral year, even in internal elections. You see the throwing around of money. Voters are bored. You can expect more of it in this year. How can we forestall that? Those will be your final thoughts.
It's just a very difficult question for me to answer, because it's an election year. If the president was standing, he would try to do everything to make sure that his party, to make the point that his party is not corrupt. But he himself is not standing. But the other side of it is that the party will want more money to go out and buy votes. So they are not likely to stop. Like you are saying, it's going to increase. Look at what happened during the primaries. So it's very difficult for me to say what we should do. You talk about prompt investigations and appropriate actions, but the government is not willing to do that. Then we, the society, we should there's a need for change of attitude. Don't ask for money from politicians, because if you ask for money, they are going to steal the money and give it to us. So at the end of the day, we are going to suffer. Look at the population of 30 million. If you give even 20 cities to each person, you can imagine that the impact of that on the national budget. So, one, we should not take the money. It's not enough to say take the money but don't vote. I mean, you have taken the money already, so the harm has already been caused. So even if you vote your conscience, you have already damaged the system. But even that's a desperate situation to say that, well, take the money but don't vote according to your conscience. So for now, I just don't know what to say or how we should go about it. Because to make corruption unattractive, you must investigate and prosecute and recover stolen money. And our government is not in a position to do that. And all the anti-corruption agencies are answerable to the president, either directly or indirectly. So as they are working, they are looking at the back to see, is this something that the president will support or not support? And so I'm really confused. I don't know what to say we should do. It doesn't look like there's any light in the tunnel.
I'll leave you with this. I just want a straightforward answer. And it's a question I'll pose to all my guests at the end, but because I'm leaving you now. From 2012 to now, when do you feel, you've been doing this for a long time, when do you feel we've had the most corrupt period?
Just using the CPI, we scored 48, I think, in 2014.
No, I don't want you to necessarily use the CPI. I want you to look at what you have perceived from 2012 till now.
My view has always been that with the change of government, every new government is more corrupt than the previous government.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
So this administration is more corrupt than the Mahama administration. The Mahama administration maybe was more corrupt than the Atta Mills administration. Atta Mills was more corrupt than Kufuor, because actually it was, like some have said, it was on the back of Atta Mills that we had the 48 that Mahama enjoyed.
And you see, with this government, the scandals are in huge dollars, not cities, but scandals involving huge dollars, contracts awarded, and some of them, because of noise, they have to retract. So definitely, you don't even need to ask the question. You are in the media, you publish these things.
You are the anti-graft campaigner.
So it's embarrassing.
You are the anti-graft campaigner. That's why I'm asking you. So you feel this administration is the most corrupt we've had in this since the inception of the CPI?
I think so.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. Dr. Nidodo, you heard Vice Azim. I put that question to him. Do you feel this is the most corrupt administration we've had since the inception of the CPI in 2012? And he said, yes, I think so. Anyway, let me come to you. So looking at these self-same matters, We must trust state institutions to fight corruption. The Chief of Staff says so. Do you have that trust in these state institutions to do that? We have Iyoko, Mamitiwa Adodankwa is there. We have Shiraj, Mr. Whittle is there. You have the OSP, Mr. Jabeng is there. We have all these institutions. The CID, yet we are where we are. Do you have trust in these institutions?
The answer is actually a very difficult one to give.
And I maybe I should add the judicial system as well, the courts.
the judicial system. I think that the entire system for fighting corruption is not operating at an optimum fashion to the extent that citizens will have that confidence and trust in them. It starts from how these institutions are operating. It is not really whether or not the institutions have the right systems to operate or they have the capacity to operate. They do have the system, they have the capacity. Perhaps there's an issue around the resources that they need to be able to operate effectively. But the challenge is who do these institutions report to? Now, we are talking about a situation where all these institutions derive their ultimate powers from the president or the office of the president. And therefore, they have to pander somehow to the whims and the caprices of the desires of the president. We need to truly, for these institutions to gain the trust of public, they definitely need to be extremely independent. The independence of these institutions need to be underscored. And they have to be allowed to operate in that independent fashion. And that is what will instill the confidence and the trust. Now, I also have something about the penal the penal chain of the justice system. Now, starting from investigation, whistleblowing, are whistleblowers protected whenever they whistleblow any issue? Who takes that? How do you do whistleblowing without being penalized or being targeted by powerful forces in the system? Then you're looking at the investigation. Those investigations, what is the integrity that they possess? How they influence from the top? I hear things like protocol is saying, or you get a call from unknown figure saying to you, you have to stop this investigation, or you have to do this investigation in a certain way. Look at the Cecilia Park case. Public was following this case with an interest when the OSP took over. Now, all of a sudden, we don't hear anything, and then we heard that he has to drop all the charges. He has to pass it on to Yoko, and this is the end of it. So, the penal system, the penal chain of the justice system has to be dealt with itself. Then you have institutions that need to have the resources to be able to function.
So before you go on, so are you suggesting that indeed, like, the perception is, and which has been voiced by some political actors and even CSOs, are you saying that our justicial system itself, the courts, may be corrupt, may be tainted, and they too ought to be looked at?
Indeed, the courts need to be tainted and need to be looked at. And when you look at, and this is not just Ghana, but all over Africa, we have situations where the rule of law is actually not prevailing in our countries, and this is a very worrying issue, because if the rule of law does not work, it affects even investment, foreign direct investment in their country. It affects individuals' ability to create wealth for themselves, because you whatever you create, whatever asset you possess, somebody can dispossess you of that asset without recourse to law, and you cannot deal with that issue. Then we also, just as we have vote purchases or vote buying, we also have justice buying. If you have the money, you can actually buy the kind of justice that you're looking for. And this is known by many Ghanaians. I mean, it's the public knowledge. So unless as a country, we really face this issue and say, well, corruption is a canker. Corruption is affecting every facet of our society. It's affecting our ability to create wealth for our citizens. It's affecting the way our citizens themselves actually have to live as citizens and benefit from the dispensation of good governance and democracy that we have. Unless we as a people have this collective desire to root out corruption, then it will not happen. Because
Right.
it also starts from us as individuals too. How much integrity do we possess in our prosecution of public offices? Do we ask ourselves, what I'm doing, is it professional? Is it ethical? It is not the first thing that comes to our mind when you are engaging in any public services. The first thing that comes to your mind is, what do I benefit from it, from this act? And I think this is really the crux of the issue.
Right. Let me come to Martin Pebu. I hope you're still with me, sir. Martin, can you hear me? All right. So I'd like to find out from you.
Yeah.
Since you're a lawyer, you have a lawyer now being the special prosecutor. Interestingly, he was one of the speakers yesterday, and he said, look, don't discredit the OSP and its principal officers. Give this time. It's only a few years old. Rather than chastise it, and talk about shutting it down, let's rather give it life so that it can deliver the results moving forward. But he also says some interesting things. For example, that to give the OSP more clout, it should be on the Judicial Council. I believe it is Inus Afuseidi saying, to come and do what? To influence the judges or what? But he's basically called for more powers for the OSP so that it can execute its work. What do you make of it?
Yes, so Mr. Kapo, I support his call for more powers, right? And more resources. Look, as we speak, the establishment budget has not been released to him. So he needs equipment, cyber, this equipment, etc., servers and all that, to be able to plug in at the ports, Bank of Ghana, check the money laundering and all those things. He hasn't obtained those. So I support that one, right? And even look, a group of 100 lawyers came together and signed a petition. We thought with all the noise, the president would have given him the establishment budget. It wasn't. So we are now about to present a petition to the president to give OSP the establishment budget. So
when is this happening?
So hopefully in the course of next week, the list is ready. I'm not sure about this week, but in the course of next week, we'll deliver the letter. It's all been signed. 100 lawyers have been bold enough to say they are calling on President Kufuor to resource the OSP well. But the matter of the Judicial Council, it's not clear to me. Maybe we need to be educated more what the OSP will be doing on the Judicial Council. Because for me, from where I sit, as I said, it's about retooling the OSP or tooling it and making sure that we also cooperate as citizens. But it's not altogether clear to me what OSP's inclusion on the Judicial Council does, other than it rather creating a wrong impression that he'll be like judge and prosecutor at the same time. You see, so the optics don't look good. That is on Judicial Council discussing how to structure the judges and etc. to deal with the corruption cases. It's not too clear. So maybe you should come, let's have a full debate. It's not everything I can understand. But the optics right now on the Judicial Council, it doesn't look great. But I support him that we should resource him well and that the establishment budget must be given, right? And also, Mr. Akapo, let's mention this. Very, very, very critical. President Kufuor must pass the Code of Conduct for Public Officers. Right. He's been dancing around it. You know, he fled from it, and then the IMF imposed it on us as a conditionality when we went to them. And very critical in that bill, we want the inclusion that public officers, when they publish, when they declare their assets, the publication will be available. They should be put on the on website, on the net, so that a citizen in Bin or Boku can access it. So that if he sees that Mr. Akapo's declaration is wrong, it's saying that that person can sit in Boku and report. He doesn't need to travel to Accra to apply for. So that is a key provision in the Code of Conduct for Public Officers. We need it so badly. Right.
And it's important because, I mean, some of these documents that are tendered, who knows? It could be a blank page with nothing on it. I mean, some have suggested. No one would know. A quick one. I want a quick response on this because we are still in the courts, and then I'll go to John Osai Kwapong. He's also called for a corruption court, Mr. Kwebu. What do you make of that? Hello, Martin Kwebu.
Yes, that one I agree. I agree to the setting up of the corruption court because on paper, it would help to bring about more efficiency. So let's say if Justice Ben Akaku is judge in corruption court 1, and then Dr. Osai Kwapong is a lawyer, what I expect is that Justice Ben Akaku will say that, look, Dr. Osai, I'll be here 5 days a week. My remit is corruption. Dr. Osai, I won't have you come today and tell me that, oh, my lord, I have another case in Sumeja, so tomorrow I can't come to court. Then Wednesday, Dr. Kwapong will write a letter. I need to go to Boku. There's another critical case. No. When Justice Akaku is dealing with only corruption cases, he also has a mandate to deliver some judgments within a month. So he will put pressure on the lawyers, and then we can have daily trials. So on paper, it looks good. It will bring about better efficiency and faster adjudication of the cases. But in practice, we'll wait to see how it will pan out.
Gentlemen, hold for me. Please don't go, because after this question I'll pose to Dr. John Osai Kwapong, then I'll take your final reflections. But I'd like to come to you, Dr. Kwapong, on a crucial matter. Even as we focused, and I reserved this for last because we focused a lot on Ghana, which is our specific case. But how about broadly? Are we making a mountain out of a molehill when you look at the general African problem of corruption? So you look at the statistics. Ghana ranked 8th in Africa with a score of 43. But that is in sub-Saharan Africa, those countries included in the index. I mean, the likes of Benin and Senegal also scored 43 with us. Ghana performed better than 39 other sub-Saharan African countries, including Burkina Faso, which scored 41, South Africa 41, South Africa slumped, Cote d'Ivoire 40, Tanzania 40, Lesotho 39. And 7 countries did better, including Mauritius with 51, Namibia with 49, you have Sao Tome and Principe with 45. But if you look at the top 15 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, looking at that comparative analysis on your screens now, you see the Seychelles, that island, look at that, 71. Cabo Verde or Cape Verde, the same country that knocked us out of the AFCON, 64. Botswana, 59, Rwanda 53, Mauritius 51, Namibia 49, Sao Tome and Principe 45, Benin 43, Ghana 43. And you see where it goes from there. Are we making a mountain out of a molehill? Are we being too hard when this, in fact, is a general African malaise, Dr. Osai Kwapong?
Well, Ben, I don't think we are being too hard about this issue because at the end of the day, even if there are other countries that are performing worse than we are, it is the citizens of Ghana that feel the brunt of these acts of corruption or abuse of public office, etc., etc. So at the end of the day, the pinch points are felt by Ghanaians. And because it is felt by Ghanaians, then they would have to, scream as loud as they can on top of their voices to say that let's keep doing something about this issue, right? Because some of the various acts of corruption has implications even for things like the basic delivery of certain public services. So if corruption is going to deny a citizen that delivery of that public service, then it is something that we have to continue to yell on the top of our voices from the rooftop about, right? At the same time, so yes, we've come in we've scored 43, but whenever you think of your peers in any situation, right, you have also what you call your aspirational peers. And I would expect that we aspire to score higher, right? We would want to be like the Cape Verdes who are scoring 64, the Seychelles who are scoring 71, and not look at it and say, well, there are 40-something countries in the sub-region, we are 8th, and therefore that is, well, we didn't do that bad, for, it's like in a class, you are 8 out of 42. And so you take your report card home and your parent says, well, Ben, you didn't do well. How come you are scoring 43 and you are 8 in the class? And you say, well, mom, I did better than, X number of students in the class, right? But the aspiration should be scoring higher, improving, being perceived as a cleaner, as a country that has a much cleaner public sector. Because as Dr. Dodu said, these things also do affect investment and other important decisions that have consequences for the country.
I would say my prayer, you start small. It's like someone trying to quit smoking or a bad habit. You start bit by bit. You don't go boom. I mean, if we go boom on this one, I'd say kudos, but I think we should target getting above 50 and then take it from there. But what it will take is what we don't know. We've fallen to as low as 40. We've hit 48. We've stagnated at 43 for 4 years. But my final question to you, gentlemen, and I'll start with you again, Dr. Osai Kwapong, I'll come to each one of you and you wrap. 1 minute, 1.5 minutes maximum, if you will. Francois Valérien, the board chairman of Transparency International, says this in the latest report. Corruption will continue to thrive until justice systems can punish wrongdoing and keep governments in check. When justice is bought or politically interfered with, it is the people who suffer. Leaders should fully invest in and guarantee the independence of institutions that uphold the law and tackle corruption. It is time to end impunity for corruption. Your final words, Dr. Osai Kwapong.
And Professor Kwesi Prempeh a couple of years ago came up with a formula for fighting corruption. And one of the elements in that formula, he called it the certainty of punishment, right? That when you make it very clear that acts of corruption would be punished without any iota of doubt, you put yourself and your institutions and your public office holders in a position of being, deterring them and reducing the incentives for corruption. At the end of the day, for me, 3 things are key. The transparency of the process will be very important. The clarity of the decision. You talk about the chief of staff saying, we should trust more, we should trust institutions more when they're fighting these acts of corruption, etc. That's fine. I'm not one to begrudge institutions or berate them or, cast aspersions on them. But transparency of the process is key. The clarity of the decisions that they arrive at, whether it is affirming that, yes, an act of corruption has happened or that an alleged act of corruption didn't happen, is very important. And then also the logic of the conclusion. Because I think citizens are discerning enough that based on how transparent and how much information you share with them, they're able to look at it and say, but, and scratch their head and say, so how did you arrive at this conclusion then based on everything that you've said? And that would be my concluding remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Osai Kwapong. Let me go on now to Dr. Dodu. Your take, sir. Final comments.
I agree with Dr. Osai Kwapong, the 3 points that he raised. In addition to that, I would include also the ability to, the enhancement of the entire penal system to be able to function at an optimum level. Also, the other point is the issue of the independence of the various institutions that prosecute corruption. We need to accept that independence. The third is, for me, a rally or a mobilization or the raising of the consciousness of citizens to really demand that corrupt practices are actually punishable and they are punished. And the forcing of the citizens or citizens pushing that force on the system or on political leaders to make this act of corruption punishable, I think is something that is very, very important. We cannot leave we cannot leave the whole charge to political leaders, because they are inept in doing. They are also very complicit. Some of them are complicit also in this act,
Right.
and therefore the citizens' demand for retribution and punishment is something that I believe is very important. That we need to raise that consciousness and get that clarion call very heavily to weigh on the system to make these things happen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dodu. Martin Kpebu, you have the final bite. Hello, Mr. Kpebu. Okay. Mr. Kpebu, if you can hear me, if you could just unmute. I'm just trying to ensure we can get your final bit. If not, we move on. All right. So it appears I will have to move on. Tetezuta, I've seen your comments for some days now. You've been saying that we should check our subtitles, and you point to certain mistakes. We don't work on the subtitles. They are generated, I believe, by Facebook. We don't do that. So the comments about checking the subtitles, we are not in charge of that. Okay? All right. And I'm grateful to all of you who sent in your comments and thoughts on this matter. We'd like to thank Isaac Ofie-J, our data analyst at Joy News. At a point, we were joined by Anti-graft campaigner Vitus Azim, and then Dr. John Osai Kwapong, CDD fellow, Martin Kpebu, a lawyer and human rights activist, together with our other guests, Dr. Ishmael Nidodu, diplomat and human development expert, senior strategy advisor to the UN, African governments, and bilateral agencies. Well, there's a lot more still to come on the AM show. We just might spring a surprise on you, but we'll be telling you about the Junior Spellers Spelling Bee contest, and later on we'll bring you AM business. But for the Junior Spellers Spelling Bee contest, well, Sweetie Abochi will be on your screens with that. We'll be right back.